From Lagos, the nation's commercial capital, this is the news at 10, live from Channels Television. Reporting tonight, Amarachi Ubani.
Good evening and welcome. Tonight, the federal government gives another shocking information on the status of infected Ebola patients. Says a fourth person has died from the virus. Health Minister confirms production of experimental drug by a Nigerian scientist for Ebola treatment. National Conference ends proceedings set to send draft proposals to amend the Constitution to the National Assembly. And Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki agrees to step down as President Barack Obama pays tribute to U.S. forces for breaking siege in northern Iraq.
On business news, the Central Bank of Nigeria reintroduces ATM cash withdrawal transactions fee with effect from September the 1st.
And on sports news tonight, Nigeria's ranking by FIFA continues to rise. The Super Eagles now ranked 33rd.
4 people have died of Ebola in Nigeria, and that's official coming from the federal government. This evening, the Minister of Health, Professor Onyebushichukwu, told journalists in Abuja that the victim, who's a nurse, was among the medical team that attended to the late Liberian-American Patrick Sawyer, who flew into the country in July with the virus. The minister also made a correction to the figure of confirmed Ebola cases in Nigeria, earlier put at 11.
Total number of deaths is now 4, having recorded an additional death about the time the minister was giving the press conference. But that the total number of confirmed cases of Ebola virus disease so far in Nigeria remains 10. The explanation for the discrepancy between the morning figure of 11 and now the figure being restated as 10 is simply that there was double counting. In the process of trying to communicate the 4th death recorded so far in Nigeria from Ebola virus disease, they looked at that and found out that what they thought was the 11th case was only problem in communicating the information between the lab, the isolation ward, and the emergency operations center are coded for confidentiality.
Minister of Health, Professor Onyebushichukwu. In the meantime, the Ministry of Health says 15 of the 21 persons under surveillance for Ebola virus in Enugu State have been cleared. Briefing journalists in Abuja, the Minister of Health, Professor Onyebushichukwu, explained that only 6 of the 21 earlier placed on surveillance actually had contact with the nurse who had contact with the late Liberian-American Patrick Sawyer, but had defied surveillance restrictions and gone on to Enugu State. The Minister of Information, who was also at the briefing, urged Nigerians to cooperate with the government in tackling the emergency health issue.
The Minister of Health led some members of the Federal Executive Council to give an update on the state of the Ebola virus outbreak in Nigeria. The minister explained that the surviving 8 people are being treated with a trial drug provided by a Nigerian scientist. The total number of persons under surveillance now stands at 169. The government have already confined all those under surveillance to Lagos, including the 6 people who came in contact with the nurse in Enugu.
Those who are quarantined, what we do is that we visit them every day. We have phone contact with them. We've educated them on what they should report to us, but we have everyday contact with them. But they don't leave their house.
We must cooperate with health officials, and all Nigerians must take this message, because ordinarily we are not supposed to be tracing people. If our people really understand, this message and appreciate this emergency, we don't need to be going to monitor adults. who ordinarily should just surrender themselves to the health rules of the country, which are global rules under the World Health Organization.
The ministers demonstrated one precautious way Nigerians can stay healthy and help government's attempt to contain the spread of the virus.
The African Union has added to global efforts at containing the Ebola virus disease with a pledge of $1 million. Speaking to our South Africa correspondent Betty Dibia today, the AU Commission chairperson says a fund is expected to fill the urgent needs of the countries affected by the disease, which has killed more than 1,000 people in West Africa.
It will be deployed in the countries who need it most, and it will be used for what they need. The fund and all the things that are coming from other countries are for solidarity to ensure that the countries are able to cope with the epidemic.
All the way from the Ebola virus disease raging through West Africa, the National Economic Council has ordered the discontinuation of the practice of using non-revenue officials for collection of taxes and levies by states and federal agencies. Now, this is one of the recommendations by the Ministerial Implementation Committee set up by the Council on the Harmonization of Taxes. Briefing State House correspondents after the meeting, presided over by the Vice President, Namadi Sambo, Anambra State's Governor, Willie Obiano, said the police are to dismantle all roadblocks mounted on highways for revenue collection across the country. The Governor of Kogi State, Idris Wada, also told journalists that the sum of 1.3 billion naira is to be spent in funding the National Power Sector Apprenticeship Program.
For close to 23 years, there has not been structured skills training for the technical manpower that works in power generation, power transmission, and distribution subsector. 3,700 trainees, 100 each, from the 36 states and FCT to be fully sponsored by the federal government under the scheme, and another 3,700 to be sponsored by state governments. That's 100 per state and FCT. Some of the objectives of the scheme are: 1, to train qualitative and skilled middle and low-level manpower for the power sector. 2, to provide employment opportunities to meet government's job creation projections for unemployed youths, which has direct correlation with the GDP growth projections. 3, to meet the local content expectation of government in the privatized electricity industry across the value chain.
Taxes and levies administered by some states are not backed by appropriate legislation. Their recommendations are as follows: discontinuation of the practice of using non-revenue officials for collection of taxes and levies at state and federal agencies. This is contrary to Section 2 of the Tax and Levies Act. All state revenue boards be empowered to automate the tax operations and for effectiveness, process accountability, and reduce leakages. The NEC to direct IG of police to dismantle all roadblocks mounted on highways for revenue collection.
In part 2, after the break, the Department of State Service, DSS, accuses APC of complicity in bombings in the Northeast. Please join us again.